So there has been a shift in my artistic practice, which happened about 15 years ago, where as a composer, I decided that everything I was going to create would have relevance, meaning that it would be about causes that I deeply believe in. So I've composed many pieces since, such as a piece about climate change, another about the incarceration of Japanese American during World War II. Um, I traveled to Cuba with my orchestra and decided to write about the Cuban people and the embargo. Also wrote a piece about the fate of the Roma people who still to this day who don't have a home to call their own. So for me, creativity is very much rooted in existential convictions and about the urgency of a message I want to convey. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with music for the sake of music, music for the sake of entertainment, and there's plenty of that. And I've certainly written music just for the aesthetic merit of it. But I don't do that anymore. I feel currently that everything that I do as a creator has to be engaged. So during my youth, I wanted to follow on the footsteps of my father, who was a painter. And so for me, it was very clear that fine arts was going to be my path. Um, I attended fine arts school for only 1 year. And then I ended up in music, which was very unexpected because music was never really a destination in itself or a path, or certainly not a career. Um, and yet when I think of that, whether it's drawing or painting or composing or playing jazz, it's all interwoven by this creative instinct. And I think that I've had that creative instinct from day one, from very early on, because I've always thought in creative terms. So I think you can expand the concept of creativity to pretty much the way you live. You know, you can be creative with ideas. So I think from an early age, I looked at the world through a creative lens, for sure. So of course, as a symphony conductor, I've conducted orchestras for 30 years, and pretty much most of the symphonic repertoire, and composers from different eras and countries and cultures and styles. And so those, of course, were enormous influences on me as a composer, because when you conduct a piece of music, you need to develop such a deep knowledge of whatever you conduct, not just the notes, but the structure and the context in which the piece was composed, and I mean, so many elements. So it's a very much in-depth exploration of the repertoire, and this has an enormous then impact on what you do as a composer. So I would say that my influences were certainly all the great composers, and the same goes with jazz. You know, jazz improvisation. You know, I listen to a lot of jazz and learn constantly from the old masters and the new cats on the block, as we say. So this is one source of inspiration. Another, of course, is people, the people I meet, and world's events. So whatever is happening at the moment certainly has an impact on my creative process. I'm very much in tune with the pulse of the entire planet. and I react emotionally to what I hear and learn about, and that permeates in my creativity. Well, that's a good question. I mean, I already feel that my creative life is so wide and rich. As I said earlier, I started in the visual arts, um, and then switched to music. I've been playing the blues and rock, and then of course focused on jazz and then gypsy jazz, and then creativity through conducting. So I mean, I've already have an incredibly rich creative life. But to answer the question, I love words very much. I like to write, and that would be an outlet that I would find really interesting. Maybe writing a book, but especially in the English language. I'm French, but I feel a lot more comfortable with English, and I think it's a really fantastic language, especially when it comes to literature and writing. So I think if I were to pursue another creative outlet, it'd be literature for sure. Very much. I feel very successful beyond my wildest dreams. I never set out to be a career musician, and certainly not a successful one. I don't think you really set yourself to do that. It happens, and it did. Uh, uh, but what I value most in that success, so-called success, is the freedom that I've enjoyed. Throughout those 30 years of creativity, I felt absolutely free to pursue different directions and create different relationships and partnerships, change directions completely, take risks, a lot of risks, gamble on projects. And that freedom for me is the most precious aspect of what we call success. It's not how much money you make or even fame or anything like this, but it's very much about I would say freedom and integrity. Uh, the conviction that what you're doing is honest, it's purposeful, um, is about more than yourself, and also the value of hard work. I'm often asked, how did you manage to have such a career, and you're so lucky, and there is an element of luck, but it's not really nearly as important as focus, convictions, and working really hard. I mean, nothing. I wouldn't say anything came easy. It didn't. So yeah, the value of freedom is for me the most eloquent expression of what we call success. Well, I feel like as of 2022, the world is under enormous stress from both an environmental standpoint and ideological. Um, we are a very tedious species. We don't seem to learn from the past. And so I feel that my creativity is going to be more and more directed towards activism. I'm going to be a creative activist and fight for what I think is important and should prevail, like freedom of expression and democracy and responsible stewardship of the environment. So this is going to be the direction of my creativity for the next 20 years or until I die. Um, that's an interesting question, because the question is self-directed. I think it'd be easier to answer if the question was, what advice would I give to someone in college today? But to myself, I mean, I've been so successful, again, related to that, the richness of my creative life and freedom. If I had to do it over again, I'm not sure I would do anything differently. So as far as advice, just have faith in your instincts. Yeah, instincts go a really long way, and don't let anyone um, suggest that you're unreasonable in your aspirations. I don't think that aspirations are never too unreasonable. You have to think big, and it's never really big enough. So the advice would be go for it. One aspect of my career that I often lamented about is that so-called classical music, and the word in itself, is problematic, but we need labels. We always need to label everything. It's reassuring and practical. But anyway, so what we call classical music has two fundamental uh, issues beyond being amazing and part of our cultural heritage, which is so precious and important. And the issues that are that pretty much all classical music has been composed by white European dead men. So there is no diversity whatsoever. And that transpires into the audience as well. So for 30 years, I've conducted all that music, thousands of concerts in various concert halls. And my audience was very supportive. I'm not suggesting that I feel anything negative towards that audience. I mean, without that audience, I wouldn't have had an opportunity to explore all that music, of course. But that audience was pretty much all white, Caucasian, well-to-do. So I would say the lack of diversity in that respect was always a challenge. And this is one aspect that I fought very hard. It's not like I wasn't aware. I was very much aware, and I was determined to overcome this as well as I could, which is very difficult. Like I remember, like in 2005, 2005, I launched a program where we would bring in children from the poorest public schools around where the concert hall was, free of charge. So we financed the busing, and then I designed a special program for children, 1 hour long, in a beautiful theater with a professional orchestra. And then we would bus thousands, literally thousands of children to that concert hall and present the orchestra. And everything was tailored around communicating with children in a way that was appealing and engaging. And it worked. It was really remarkable. There was tremendous diversity. In fact, most of those kids were Black, Asian, Latino, and they were very, very engaged, and there was a wonderful a feeling of discovery. And we did that for a few years, 2005, 6, 7, and then in 2008, the recession hit, and the funding for this went away, which was really sad, because it showed that given the opportunity, those children uh, would come and show great interest. Now, I remember that I was very much warned that all those kids would be unruly and impossible to manage in this big, 1,000-seat concert hall. Imagine 1,000 kids in there. And it wasn't true at all. They were very attentive and responsive, and we received a lot of fan mail from those kids describing their experiences and what a revelation this was for them. They've never been to a concert hall. They had never, let alone seen an orchestra or played an instrument. And so, yeah, this was really my way to respond to the existential challenge that I felt regarding the complete lack of diversity in classical music. Um, well, the aspect of my live experience that influenced my artistic values is relationships. It's absolutely relationships that forges everything, with of course, my family, my children, my friends, uh, strangers that I meet once, and it's very much about the human condition and learning about it. I feel that one of the great virtues of growing older is the understanding of the human condition, and the more I understand it, and the more it has an impact in my creative process, certainly, and the easier life becomes. So for its virtues and its flaws, but that growing wisdom has been certainly my greatest assets when it comes to transferring that into my creativity.